So you see these words on the screen here. Don't just reopen, reimagine. This has been inspired by one of today's great leaders, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. And Andrew was speaking over the weekend about how not just to kind of come out of this the same way we went in, but how do we reimagine our businesses? How do we reimagine ourselves? How do we take this time to pause a little bit and look at doing things differently, more creatively, more with flexibility, with optionality? And, it's a time that we shouldn't return to yesterday because, yesterday is kind of done. And let's look at this. And part of what we do is doing on a personal and business level to pivot, to think differently, to brush up on our skills. He gave an example about how the New York L train, which serves 400,000 people a day in commuting, everybody had told him that the New York subway system, that part of it would have to shut for over a year. And those 400,000 people would have to find different ways to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And he basically took some smart engineers down the tunnels. He gave it some creative thought, and he came up with a smart, new, and different plan that basically enabled the subway to be fixed in 14 months without ever shutting it down, just by using repairs overnight. And he thought differently. And if I can encourage everybody, and it's part of what Jen's training is it's let's think differently. Let's look fresh. Let's shake things up. This is the time to do it. It's a chance to kind of reinvigorate, as I mentioned, our personal and business selves, to learn new skills, empower ourselves, and women empowerment, and of course, male empowering male. And let's just kind of reimagine and make growth a reality as out of home comes back strong. So that's kind of my guidance words is not just to reopen when we come back, but use this time to reimagine, think differently, think better personally and professionally. DPAA, as you all know, we spend a lot of time connecting people, empowering people to knowledge, to connections, to information, to data, to the advertising world, and all of that continues to go on. In some ways, we really reinvented ourselves, and we've pivoted to do everything we do and more in a virtual environment. And thank you all for your great notes and letters about how you're appreciating membership at this time with all of our events and activities. One that we're incredibly proud of is we have built the first digital out-of-home public service campaign, and on a global basis. This is the We Are the Counter-Virus campaign. You could see it running. This is up in London on the upper right, in Times Square in the left, on the ride sharing, and throughout the streets of New York. It's run in Japan, in India, in Africa, throughout EMEA. And once again, this is created distinctly for our media by a hot shop, our partner Madwell, in the hip Brooklyn, New York. So we're very proud of what this has done, and the other PSA campaigns. It's enabled people to get used to looking at our screens for government information, for virus information, for separation information. And the good news is that this will continue as we move forward. Coming out of this, people will be looking at the screens, and all of our research shows that when you put content on screens, people will look at them and advertisers will buy more. For those of you that haven't seen it, let any of us know. We produce these new series, DPAA Connects, where we enable ourselves to spend a lot of time in front of major CEOs of ad agencies and major brands. So what's happened here is that these are intimate. I go into people's homes virtually, they come into mine, and we talk about what's important to them. And some of the real important people in the ad industry have given our members distinct views on what they're thinking about and looking at. The head of branding for Microsoft, Kathleen, Nush from Mediacom, the head of global media at MasterCard, Cecilia, running media globally for IBM. We've also produced these with Michael Bassick, who's a big believer in out-of-home. Chris from Madwell, and I know Chloe's on the call. David Roth is the CEO of The Store at WPP. Ali McCallum, CEO of Kinetic UK, and of course, we'll be releasing to our members the one with the fabulous Jen Willie as well. So make sure you watch these. They're available to members. We release them a little bit later to non-members. Follow us on social media, or if you're looking for it, just send us a note. This is the first one that we released with the CEO of North America, Colin Kinsella, who's a really sharp guy and really loves out of home at Havas. He's the CEO of Havas. And then keeping in front and keeping the messaging going, I did a video interview with Advertising Age. Janine Pogge interviewed me, and we talked about coming out of this and what it looks like through it, and with ideally, realistic but optimistic viewpoints is what I spoke about. For those members, we have twice a week coming out from our member Michelman and Robinson, all information on the loans from the government, on how to deal with HR issues, what's going on with the SEC. And if you're a member and want this, just get in touch with any of us and we'll make sure you're on the mailing list. Critical data during this information. So in addition to everything you've seen, we're also producing DPW Davos events, where a lot of our members get together just to talk through the issues of the day, how we're dealing, and what are the issues tomorrow. Our board has been meeting every 2 weeks now, is the DPW board on roundtables, once again at the highest level, seeing where we're going and how can we share ideas and best practices. We've also got, of course, WE.DOOH, the next one coming up May 19th. And then our Video Everywhere Canada was supposed to be in June, will now be in July, and that will be virtual. And we're hoping to be live and in person at Chelsea Piers in New York City on October 13th with a big Video Everywhere Summit. Last year, as you all know, we had over 1,000 people. This year it will happen, whether parts of it virtual or not, but it will happen. And then there's a whole bunch of other live and virtual events that we're doing for our membership. A couple of important messaging points as we're in the thick of this and looking out. Digital is making it very exciting for us. The ability to have optionality, delivery, schedule shifting is really going to increase our business coming out of this. The fact of programmatic, making it easy to use, making schedules changes, making the automation happen is really going to be powerful for our medium and will give us good share shifting relative to other media. And our screens, as I mentioned earlier, have become very important for people to look at. So once again, the powerful nature of digital out of home. And then now that there's KPIs and ROIs from digital in the out of home space, as people shift to more measurable media in these challenging times, we have a good seat at that table as well. Something interesting to keep in mind is that television production is shut down. Commercial production is shut down. It's going to take a lot longer for commercial production to ramp up than digital out of home coming out of this. Once again, programmatic will lend a great hand in that coming out. And then if you think about the quality of television, having all their shows shut down is not going to be ramping up very quickly as well. And while people are going to over-the-top television and they're going to see Tiger King and Netflix and Amazon Prime, regular television, satellite, and broadcast continues to experiencing cord cutting, which will make for a lot of money to come to out of home as well. They actually won't be able to take all the make goods because of their lowered ratings and impressions, so that money will move over. And then what I'm calling the upfront. There will not really be an upfront television market this year. Money will move into scatter and local, which will also give an advantage to us. If the upfront happens, it'll happen small and late. And then, of course, we could take advantage of that. There is going to be money on the sidelines. As we know, there's been no sports. There's money there. The Olympics have been cut out. There's money there. And then keep an eye for election activities that are coming out as well. And that should be some good money as markets open up throughout the country. And then, as I mentioned, with the habits shifting to over-the-top television and regular television, which has traditionally been a great branding and reach medium, getting compromised, who is best to take that mantle but out of home as the branding and reach medium going forward? And then, of course, as I spoke to Ad Age, there's a pent-up demand to get out. What does that mean? That means when we get out, we're going to be in a happy place. We're going to be with friends. We're going to be outside. That is a great environment and a positive environment for messaging. Brands love positive environments. The great media prognosticator Marshall McLuhan talked about the medium is the message. When you're in a great, happy place, you're more amenable to capturing and embracing those messages. That's where out of home is going to be. So everybody in the call, we've been cocooning for a bit here in the out of home space. Of course, the audiences haven't been there, but the markets are starting to open and it is happening. And for those of you that know, when you've been cocooning for a while, as we have, what happens after that? And I think we're beginning to see that, and we anticipate being a big, beautiful butterfly when we're finished with this cocooning and we all come out. So in terms of not only making big, beautiful butterflies, making ourselves more empowered, I'm now going to hand it over to Jen, who will take us through WE.DOOH for today.
And so we are going to jump right in. Now, for those of you who joined the original call, I want to get a sense of how everybody's feeling now. So I know that we'll also have people who are joining today who weren't a part of the last one. So when you're on Menti, tell us, how do you feel about negotiating today? It looks like we've already got some answers coming in here, which is great. Do you know how to negotiate? Do you actually look forward to it and think of it as a challenge? Are you effective at it? So not just about knowing how to do it, but you're good at it and you're proud of the work that you've done. Or would you rather visit the dentist? And if so, you're not alone. Okay, so we've got some results coming in here. It looks like we're actually getting way more people than last time who are starting to look forward to negotiating. And I'm excited to see that. And you're only going to become that much more effective, because in today's session, what we're going to do is build on what we learned in the first workshop that we did to really and we know that most of us have been dealing with a lot of that lately, or on the personal front, which you also may need now more than ever, based on the fact that you may be negotiating anything from rent with your landlord to household responsibilities with your roommates or spouses. So, okay, we're going to take this up a notch, and just also want to get a sense of the group here. Who participated in that last negotiation workshop that we held 3 weeks ago, the part 1? Okay, so it looks like we do have a lot of newbies. So what I will share with you, certainly in the handout that you receive once you text 66866, you'll actually get the whole flow of what we did in part 1. That's the first few pages of the handout. So if you missed part 1, you can always go back and re-experience that. And I know DPAA has also shared the recording on their social media channels. So if it's helpful for you, you can go back and watch that. However, you won't miss out on anything in this one if you didn't attend the last one, because again, we'll reinforce some of those basic fundamentals that we had covered in the last session, and we're going to add to that this time around. Okay, and I'm glad we're going to do that, because it looks like quite a few of you were not able to join the first one. And for those of you who did participate in the last one, have you negotiated since then? Were you able to put some of the strategies and techniques that we learned in the last one into practice? So it looks like we have only a few of you, at least so far. And as you see, these numbers are still coming in. And that's okay, because what we'll be learning today will really help you have a more robust approach to any negotiations that you have. So if you have had an opportunity to negotiate since the last time, great. Put some of it into practice, but now we are going in to take it up. And one more question for all of you. If you did negotiate, how did you feel going into the negotiation? Did you feel a little more prepared? Did you feel a little less fear and anxiety, and as we had talked about last time, distress, which is bad stress, as opposed to eustress, which is good stress, which allows you to perform better and get better results? And did you perhaps feel a little bit more confident? Okay, it looks like we're having some people who are making some progress as we go, so that is terrific. And as we get started here, again, if there's something that's important for you, personally or professionally, that you want to look at the lens of everything that we're focusing on for the next hour to help you be a more successful negotiator, please add that in to Menti so that we have a really good sense. From some of the conversations that we've had with our WE.DOOH advisory board, certainly what's been on everybody's mind is negotiating contracts and vendor agreements, negotiating media deals where unfortunately people need to, from either side, the buy side or the sell side, they need to either pause their media, they need to stop what they're doing, they need to ask if they can delay payment. There's a lot of different conversations in addition to the human capital questions that have been coming up related to furloughs and reduced time schedules and layoffs and job searching. So we want to make sure that we are empowering you with the things you need help with. And if you take a look here, you'll see there's certainly real estate is a big piece, especially in this industry, in terms of where you need to be negotiating those contracts, vendor negotiations, promotions, new client acquisition, delayed activations. We're seeing that on a regular basis, and this is happening across the entire industry. So I do want you all to just take a look at the screen for a second to remind yourself you are not alone. Okay, there are so many other people who are stressed because they need to negotiate exactly the same things that you have. So again, remember you are not alone, and that is why we are going to be focusing in our time that we have together today, so that we can make this as valuable as possible for you. So I do want to make sure everyone can now see the new screen I'm sharing. Level Up Bonus Workshop. Okay, terrific. For all my Super Mario Brothers fans out there. Whoop, whoop. So what we'll be covering off today, we're going to reinforce and deepen those skills that we talked about in session 1. We're also going to talk about getting started, which is incredibly important. We'll share some of the research that's out there about how you can do that right and from a position of power and influence. We'll talk about a little bit more about gain and loss framing and remind you of what that means, especially since we have so many new folks joining us this time. We'll talk about how do you structure concessions in a way so that you can maximize your outcomes. Talk about one of my favorite topics, the log rolling. And as I had mentioned, this is going to be a more interactive workshop than we even had the last time. So we are going to have some simulations, role play, and Q&A as we're going throughout the program. But before we get in to the techniques and the strategies, I do want to introduce you to my friend, Ernestine. Ernestine, this was her back in the early 90s. And she was somebody who, at the age of 55, started laughing at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, or in the mirror, as she went bathing suit shopping. And she said, you know what, I am not happy with how I am and how I look today. And so she said she wanted to start exercising. Her and her sister started exercising together. At the age of 71, her sister had passed away, but she asked her to continue being an inspiration for other people to exercise as they get older. So after her sister died, she hired a trainer. And 8 months later, Ernestine made it into the Guinness Book of World Records because she won her first bodybuilding championship at the age of 71. Okay, remember, she had never exercised in her life until she had turned 56 years old after she had that realization with her sister. And guess what she's up to today? At 82 years old, this is Ernestine. Okay? And I wanted to share this because bodybuilding and negotiating are very similar. In both of them, you need to know how to do it, you need to have a plan to do it, and you have to practice. And so I'm sharing that because you, even if you have negotiation skills, you can realize that you can take it to the next level so that, again, you may have some experience under your belt, but you can now become that much more confident. And again, think of negotiation as a muscle that you can build with time. As we had shared in the last one, all of the workshops that we do focus on the fearless fundamentals. And these are the core principles we need, especially when it comes to negotiation. So you need courage. We're going to talk about that today. Control. It is critical that you are controlling that negotiation, even if you feel like you're not in a position of power. Confidence is certainly key to it all. And then we're going to talk about communication and how you can connect in meaningful ways that will ensure that you have the strongest outcomes coming out of this. But the place we're going to start with today is around taking that first step. And that's because, as we all know, that first step can really be the hardest part of it all. And according to research that's out there, in fact, it's that first 5 minutes of any negotiation that can determine the outcome. This is in In behavioral science, they call this a slice. So that first 5 minutes, in fact, of anything in life can determine the outcome. And research studies have proven that the impact that you make in 5 minutes will determine everything from what will happen with a criminal case, marriages and divorces, thanks to Joel Gottman, as well as job interviews as well. But it's also been proven out in negotiations. So we're going to focus on how do you have the greatest amount of power and influence in those first 5 minutes, because that is what you need to establish yourself with. As it relates to communication, there are 3 measures of vocal quality that will actually give you power and influence. And these are emphasis, activity, and mirroring. And we're going to talk a little bit about what each of these mean and how you want to adapt to that. So emphasis is what's called speech prosody, which is the variation in pitch and volume and tone, the way you speak. So I'll give you an example. It's the difference between saying, being a member of the DPAA will change your life, or being a member of the DPAA will change your life. Okay, the first one you could see, pretty stable. Second one, a lot of emphasis that goes into it. So show me in the chat right now, do you think that when you're going into a negotiation that you should have a lot of emphasis to show that emotion and the engagement, or do you want to keep it very stable? So right again, put either emphasis or none into the chat right now. Let's see what everybody has to say. And everybody open up your chat, take a look at what we all think in terms of whether or not you want to emphasize and essentially speak like a roller coaster. Now, for those of you WE.DOOH members who attended the Confident Communications workshop that we held last year at Havas, thank you for hosting us, we talked about the importance when you're presenting or pitching that you want to talk like a roller coaster. You want to have a lot of emphasis in there. So tell us in the chat, do you think you want to have a lot of emphasis in a negotiation or very little? Let's see what we see. Emphasis, 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 emphasis. Wow, that is pretty consistent. It's unanimous on emphasis. Wow. Sadly, the research shows that it's the exact opposite. The research shows that emphasis in a negotiation shows that you are emotionally tied to it. And it makes the other person seem like you are too vested and dependent and potentially even desperate when you're going into a negotiation. And so close your eyes for a second and think about it. How do we generally think of most expert attorneys or negotiators? Do you think of them as the most robust, emphasizing people? Or are they generally much more even-keeled and balanced in their delivery? That's part of the reason why. They do not want to seem too emotionally involved in anything you do. So again, remember this. When presenting or pitching, talk like a roller coaster. When you are getting into negotiation mode, I want you to think about that carousel. You are balanced, you are even-keeled, you are in control. Okay. Second thing that we're going to focus on here is activity. So this relates to the amount of time you spend speaking in any negotiation. So the fraction of time, the percent of time that you are doing the talking in negotiation. So if you think you should be talking more, put more in the chat. Or if you think you should be talking less, put less in the chat. Less, 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 less. Oh, I love it. Because you are absolutely correct. If you are in the lower status role and you're going to a negotiation where you're trying to get something from the other person. So let's use an example of a job interview. If you are the one who is trying to negotiate, but you don't really hold the power because you don't know in that negotiation what is the salary that they'll put out there or what is the equity that they're potentially offering, you want to do a lot less talking. If you're in the power mode or that power position, you can talk more. That's fine because you have a clearer role, and you'll probably be making an anchor in that case because you have more data and research to know where you want to go at, but generally you want to speak less. And again, I use the example of the promotion or the job interview or getting that offer from a job. But in most cases, most of us do feel like we're in that lower status role. You want to be able, as everybody wrote here, you want to talk less so you can ask questions, gather as much intelligence as you can throughout the course of that negotiation. And then the last piece of it is mirroring. So for any of you who are familiar with this concept, it's observable behaviors that you mimic in the person that you're talking to. It can show empathy. And so there's, again, a ton of research in terms of the impact that mirroring has on human behavior in a number of different ways. For even just one of the research studies I find fascinating is that servers, so waiters and waitresses, who mimic the speech and nonverbal language of their patrons tend to get much higher tips, substantially higher tips. So what do we think? Do you want to mirror in negotiation? Is that important? Let's see. Yes or no? Mirror, mirror, mirror. Okay. So it turns out that the research shows that with mirroring, there is a definite advantage for you if you are in that lower status role. Again, so think about that negotiation for a job. If you are the one who feels like you don't have the power, you want to mirror. And again, think about mirroring as two different dimensions. Verbal mirroring, so speaking the same way they speak. If they speak in short staccato, you want to do the same thing. And then even nonverbal behavior. So if I'm doing this with my hair right now, all of you ladies and men watching at home with long hair, you should have just done the same thing. Okay, I can't see you all. But that is the value of mirroring. It actually builds empathy with your negotiation partner. Again, we don't want to think of it as an opponent. We want to think of it as a negotiation partner on the other side. Now, another interesting thing to get you started and get in the right mindset to have power and influence throughout the negotiation is emotion and your nonverbal body behavior. Harvard Business School even talks about, is it appropriate to use emotion or perceived emotion as a negotiating tool when you go into a negotiation? And while they say it can be questioned, is it ethical or not? The vast majority of the folks researched and interviewed by Harvard all agree that it is ethical to use emotion, especially if you're doing it in a positive way. So there is research that shows if you come off angry in a negotiation, in many cases, you'll get the other side to give you another concession. But the reality is, and we'll show additional research around this, when you come off as positive from an emotion and you mirror that behavior, or you help people mirror back to you the behavior you want to see, you're actually better off in the long run as it relates to negotiation. So your overall outcome will be greater than getting people to respond to an episode of anger. So even if you don't feel like it, think about how can you put a little smile on your face. And if you can find a way to connect to and channel something that would really make you smile, then a true smile has what's called the Duchenne marker, and the corners of your mouth go up a little bit and your eyes crinkle. And when you have that real smile, people have a better perception of you, they respect you more, higher judgment, and you have more credibility. So if you can find a way to channel that as you're starting it, even if it's something that's uncomfortable, people's physical reaction will mirror that back to you. So smile and dial, as Diana just shared with everyone. I love that. Thanks for sharing that in the chat there, Diana. And so when you are going to start a negotiation, you want to begin with this mantra, which has been very important for me my whole life, which is start as you mean to go on. So if you want to start that negotiation in a positive place where there's going to be a win-win outcome at the end, begin that way. Okay, try and put those fears and anxieties that you may have about how it's going to go, put it aside and think about how you're going to finish and feeling good and it being a win-win for everyone. And so the best way to do that is to visualize your success. And the reason that you see an Olympic gold medal there is because several decades ago, Olympic trainers for the Russian Olympic team did research, and there's been a lot of other research as well, but with their athletes to see what is the ideal mix of visualization research in training for something even as physical as participating in the Olympics. So they broke up all of their athletes into 4 groups: 100% physical training, 75% physical with 25% visualization, 50% physical, 50%, and 25% of their time on physical training, with 75% of it having those athletes closing their eyes and visualizing them taking either the mat or the slopes or whatever it was. So in the chat right now, tell me, from a physical perspective, how much time went towards physical training to get the optimal outcome and have the best performance? So 100% physical, 75% physical, 50 or 25%. Let's see what you have to say. I'm seeing in the chat already, I'm seeing some 75s, 50s, 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 a few 25s thrown in there. 75, 50, 50, 50. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. It looks like we're sort of set between 50 and 75. But I want to give a big shout out to those 25%ers out there, because the research shows that 75% visualization for something as physical as participating in the Olympics had the greatest outcome. And that's because neuroscience researchers have found that through visualization, you can actually create muscle memory that will react. And so, yes, Diana, start with the end in mind. I might be calling you, join the wet cement team. Loving what you're giving us over here. Okay, so yes, visualization matters. And so what we're all going to do right now is we're going to take just 30 seconds. I want all of you to close your eyes. And for those of you who are on video, I can see you. I can see that your eyes are still open. So close your eyes. And I want you to think about going into whatever next negotiation you have. It's maybe by phone, it may be by Zoom, it may be in your household. Channel that exact visualization or the exact negotiation you're going to have. How do you want to start the conversation? What are you going to be wearing? How are you going to stand or sit? Are you going to be smiling? Are you going to be looking stern? Are you going to be looking concerned? Will your heart be racing, or will you have taken a deep breath? Would you have just listened to some music that makes you feel like you are strong and in control and calm? If you would have just listened to some music, what song would that have been that would put you in the right state of mind? And then think through any other things, and I'll shut up here for a few seconds, that would help you feel as powerful and influential and confident going into that negotiation. Okay, so we'll bring everybody back. And I want you to take for a moment, if you were able to download the worksheet, put in there what stands out for you from that visualization. Again, you'll want to go to the part 2 section. And even if not, write on a piece of paper, write it down. What were those things that you could see yourself doing that made you feel stronger as you were going through it? And if there's anything that really stands out to you, again, we'd love for you to put it in the chat, because we can all learn from each other. What are those things that you can do to make you feel in control? So can't wait to see what Diana Patassi is going to have to say in the chat, because she's my new girl. So add that in the chat. We can all help each other through. And if you can, write that down for yourself. Now, there's one last important piece. Now, if you were able to join the last session, we spent some time talking about the importance of timing in a negotiation. And timing from the standpoint of everything from, you don't want to have a big ask at work on a Friday afternoon, because it can set things in motion in the wrong way. You want to be sensitive to your supervisor's personal experience, if they are dealing with loved ones being lost right now for coronavirus, you don't want to be asking for something to go above and beyond. You want to be sensitive to what's happening with the organization. You want to be sensitive from a timing perspective as it relates to things once this is all over, as it relates to review cycles. So there's a lot of different things you want to take into account as it relates to timing. And certainly, whenever you're going to ask for something, if you are about to, or you just got an award, you had a great big win at work, you had a client who wrote a beautiful note saying what a great partner you are, you want to act very quickly following on that so you can leverage the goodwill. But there's also something really important we didn't talk about last time as it relates to timing. And that is that you need to be able to take a few minutes to get yourself into that mind space to be controlling and confident and courageous and have done your research and have a plan before you go into a negotiation. Because the reality is, in the real world, what generally happens is you're sitting working on email and you get a phone call from somebody about something that you were not prepared to start negotiating. So the first thing that you can do when that happens, and we added this in the handout as well, is just practice saying something as simple as, I'm so glad that you called. I'm thrilled to hear that you are offering me the job. However, I'm in the middle of something right now. Give me 5 minutes. Let me finish that up. Or, you know what, this will take me about an hour if you haven't done any research yet, or you're really not ready for the negotiation. And then I'm really looking forward to this call, but let's schedule it for 5 minutes from now, an hour from now, whatever amount of time, depending upon the nature of that negotiation, that you think that you can get. It's a very simple statement, and once you practice saying it a few times, it'll become very natural for you, but you never want to be caught off guard when you're going into that negotiation. Okay, and that will be happening a lot right now as you're getting those phone calls where people want to cancel contracts. You may all be hearing it all the time. Oh, I'm in the middle of something right now. Give me 5 minutes. But even in that 5 minutes, you can even start with just that mindfulness and visualization exercise that we just did to think about, how am I going to start so that I can go into this negotiation with a positive, proactive plan so that I come out of it really strong. Okay, so now we're going to get really into the meat of everything as it relates to the process that you want to put in place for any negotiation. So we started with the preparation piece. Now we're going to focus more on the strategy and execution part of it. Now, if you had joined the last workshop, you would have known that there are 5 numbers you need to know before you go into any negotiation. I'll quickly review this because we do have so many folks who did not join us in the last one. So first and foremost, you want to start with your BATNA. And BATNA is an acronym that stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. So this is, if you cannot get a deal done, you actually could go another route. So again, using the example of if you were trying to get a new job and you got an offer from the job and you really hoped your target is that your target salary would be $100,000 a year, and there is a chance they may offer you $75,000 a year. Well, what are the alternatives you have in addition to accepting that job? Let's assume that right now you're making $70,000 a year. Well, at $75,000, there's a lot of alternatives you have. You can continue to stay in your job. You can negotiate for more. You can use that offer to help you get other offers and know that that's the minimum you can accept. You could go to your current employer and let them know that there are other offers on the table and you want to get that promotion that you've been waiting for, obviously with the time being right. Maybe this isn't the exact time for that, but you want to establish what are all of those alternatives, and that will then help you understand for you what is your walk away. So your walk away, also known in negotiations as your reservation value. This is where anything below that or above it, depending upon what kind of a negotiation you're in, you say, I'm just going to walk away. This is not worth my time. Because with your BATNA, and again, thank you, Carrie, for putting that in there, that's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. You don't want to negotiate yourself into something where you actually had better options than committing to that negotiation. Then we get to your ZOPA. And your ZOPA is the zone of possible agreement, or zone of potential agreement, depending upon who you're reading. And if somebody could write that in the chat so nobody forgets it, that would be great. Zone of possible agreement equals ZOPA. And that is when you take what your target is and your floor, and you map that out against your partner's target and potential floor. And you figure that out by doing a lot of research. And if you go through the materials that we covered in week 1 or the session 1, you'll see some of those things there. But you want to do everything from researching, let's say if it was for an apartment that you needed to negotiate your rent based on the fact that you may have just been furloughed, you may have just gotten a reduction in your salary, you may have just been laid off. What may be top of mind for you right now is negotiating a reduction in your rent. And so you want to spend a lot of time doing research in terms of what is the going rate for apartments? What are your neighbors paying right now? What is on the market right now for other similar apartments in your neighborhood, in your building? And so all of that will help you inform what is a realistic target of what they want and what their walk away reservation value floor might be for them. And then you can figure out what is a possible agreement. And then there is the anchor or offer that you would make. And we say anchor because generally whoever makes the first offer will set the tone, because that initial offer becomes an anchor and pulls all other numbers within the negotiation towards it. And so we spent a lot of time last time talking about the fact that first offers have a very strong anchoring effect. So if you take the time to do your research and map out those 4 other numbers, then you should have the confidence that you can make that first offer because it has that strong anchoring effect. And again, as those 5 numbers come together, this is what it looks like. You can figure out what's your target, your walk away, their walk away. And then you'll want to make that first offer, which is the anchor, just outside of the zone of possible agreement. So you want it to be a little bit more aggressive, closer to your blue sky or your target than where that zone of possible agreement is. So keep in mind, you're always or almost always going to come down a little bit from that first offer. And so that's why you want to give yourself some wiggle room so that you can move within there. So let's talk this time now about 2 anchoring strategies. And these are based on a wealth of research that's out there. And in the handout that we shared, you'll see on the last few pages, there's some of the research and sources within there. So if you want to learn a little bit more, you can, and we've shared out that research with you. But one thing that has been found is there's 2 different anchoring strategies you want to keep in mind when you are making that first offer. The first one is to provide a range. So if you wanted to be at, let's say, $2,500, if that's where you'd really want to make the first anchor or the first offer, instead of saying $2,500, you would give them a range to say, well, I think, my rent should be anywhere between $2,200 to $2,300. And research shows that you are going to claim more value if you put it in a range offer. There's another alternative to that. And again, this is completely based on what feels best to you and the nature of the negotiation that you're going into. And that is a lesson that we've learned through the game of operation. Anybody love the game of operation as a kid? Give me a little woo woo. Let's see it. A little hand raising. Okay, good. There's some of you out there with me. I loved operation. It's that you have to be precise, right? Operation is all about being precise. And so there's also research that shows when you make a precise offer, rather than giving a round number, you will claim more value in your negotiation. So if you wanted to make $255,000 for the sale of your house right now or your apartment, if you have a house for $255,000, God bless you. But if you wanted to sell your studio apartment for $255,000, by asking for $255,500, The likelihood that you will get more money in the end has been proven through numerous different research studies. And there's a number of reasons for it, but most importantly, the person you're negotiating with assumes that you have more information than they do when you give them a very precise number rather than a round number of like 255 or 256. So keep that in mind as well. So those are your two anchoring strategies. Either give a range with the higher part of the range of more than you would ever expect to get, or give them a very precise number. So, and the reason why you'd go with one or the other is, again, using that example of selling an apartment, you can't give people a range in your real estate listing, but you can absolutely do it with a precise offer. And another thing when you're making that initial offer is that it is critical to provide the rationale and justification for your offer. So when you can share the kind of research that you've done that's given you the ammunition to provide that very specific number, again, that will put you in a much stronger position and higher likelihood that you are going to gain as much as you can throughout the course of the negotiation. So I thought it might be helpful to give a very specific, real example of how you could open a negotiation. Okay, so read along with me here for a second. It could be something like, I'd like to discuss my rent. Unfortunately, I've been furloughed, which has changed my financial situation. After conducting research into similarly sized apartments in our neighborhood and building, I learned that my average monthly rent is substantially lower than what I've been paying. And I've also spoken to real estate agents and neighbors and viewed the available listing, and it's clear I'm paying too much. And that's why I'd like to talk about reducing my rent from what it currently is at $3,000 a month to $2,450 per month. Okay, so this is an example, and if you break it down, what you'll see, what we have in here, is first, we share the why, so that somebody's open to having the conversation and doesn't just boot you out the door and say, I'm not talking about this, okay? By providing some of that why, you help get them to the bargaining table. Then what you do is you share that research and the rationale, and then you want to put that anchor in there, and again, in a case like this, a precise offer or a precise anchor will benefit you in the long term. And so right now, I want everyone to take a moment, and if you have the worksheet, you can add it right in there because you can always keep that for the future. And if not, you can type it away on your computer or on the side. But I want you to, again, think very specifically about what negotiation you have coming up in your life and how would you start that conversation? What would be your very specific, if you had to put it in an email or you were going to pick up the phone, what exactly would you say? And write out right now exactly what you would say. And I'll give you a minute or so to do that. And so as you finish writing out how you're going to start that negotiation, so you have really clear script or narrative to follow, we are going to break all of you into breakout rooms, because not only is this about helping build your negotiation skills, but it's also about bringing us all together and creating this incredible community that we have at DPAA. And remember, coming out of this, we have some additional next level skills as it relates to asking for concessions and log rolling. So stick around as well after that. We've got so what we're going to do, we're going to put everybody into breakout rooms, and we're going to do this lightning speed, but we want you to share your name, what you do. You can share the context for your negotiation if you think that would be helpful to the other folks in the room. And how would you start the negotiation that you have coming up? Because many times saying it out loud can be incredibly helpful for you. And certainly if there's anybody in the group that has some quick feedback for you of how you could make that even stronger, or perhaps an important element that you've left out, please feel free to share that. And so with that, we are going to break everyone into some quick breakout rooms. Again, we're going to do this quickly. So you'll be in the room for about 3 to 4 minutes. So just be really clear, your name, what you do, context, and then share that introduction to how you're going to get started for your negotiation. I do want to ask of those folks who were in breakout rooms with a few different people there, and I'll call on one of our fearless leaders on the WE.DOOH advisory board, Kate Burrell. Kate, if you can share with us if there was anything interesting or any commonalities or threads or ahas that came out of your breakout room. And if you could just take yourself off mute to share, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. What we actually just spent most of the time saying, hi, how are you? What are you guys doing here? Are you enjoying the session? Isn't Jen great? I had Claude and Keith and Dorothy in my session, and we kind of just touched on the individual ones just very quickly of what we're negotiating. So for Keith, it was negotiating with his children at home at the moment. And for me, it's more sort of like long-term and longevity. So we briefly talk very quickly about the particular situation that we're in individually.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And so with that, we're going to talk a little bit about framing the negotiation. So again, for those of you who were a part of this last week, we talked about the importance of understanding whether or not you want to come to this from a positive or a negative, or think of it as pain versus gain as you're negotiating, especially as it relates to any of the concessions as you start getting into that. And so as a quick refresher, again, because many of you were not on the last one, loss framing is when you actually talk about the loss or the pain that they will endure from any concession or anything that you want them to give up, or if they don't participate in the negotiation. So using the example that we had last time, if you needed to negotiate your rent with your landlord and you said, I'd like to talk about this, and he or she said, I'm not even considering it, then you'd want to loss frame and say, I think it's important for you because I don't want you to lose out on 6 months or more rent if I can't pay my rent or if I have to move out, because the likelihood is in today's world, you're not going to be able to move new people into this apartment anytime soon. So you're helping them see what they could lose out on in the future. And again, that's best in places where there's a real unsure future or impact that this will have on them. On the other side of that is gain framing. And gain framing is talking about what's the gain or the benefits that they'll derive. And this is best when it's very clear and certain of what they'll get out of this by being willing to negotiate or giving you a concession. And so what we wanted to share is the level up piece of this is the research behind how and why you're best off gain framing as much as possible. And again, being in that positive, proactive mindset where you are laying the groundwork of why this is a good thing for them rather than talking about what they'll lose or why it could be potentially bad. And again, you'll see all of the research sources are in the handout that we've shared with all of you. But the reality is, if you are a gain framing negotiator, you will get a more cooperative counterpart. So they'll be more likely to continue finding a way to drive the most value from the negotiation. They, as well as you, will care most about both equity and equality. And in fact, the research shows that when you are regularly gain framing, again, thinking about how do you position things so the benefits the other person will get, you will get higher joint outcomes across the board. And this is really important because a lot of people think you do need to be focusing on the negative or coming to a negotiation with anger so that you'll get the kind of response that you're looking for. But again, substantial research that's out there shows that is not necessarily the case. There is a time and a place for it. And again, depending upon the nature of it, that is something you may need to consider. But for the vast majority of any negotiation that you're in, focus on the positive side, the benefits, and gain framing those negotiations. So now I have a quick question for you. When you are in the act of giving and asking for concessions, once you've made that first offer, you'll probably need to figure out what concessions are you giving up for the future and in what order. So one of the great behavioral scientists, Daniel Kahneman, did a study, and I want to see what you think of all of this. So which scenario would make you happier? If you're walking down the street and you find 20 bucks, or you're walking down the street and today you find 10 bucks and tomorrow you find another 10 bucks. So in the chat right now, tell me, is it A or B? Which would make you happier, scenario A or scenario B? Got some B's out there. Got an A or so, few A's. Well, the reality is it looks like we're skewing towards B, and the research shows that in fact, getting good news in installments makes people feel happier and more satisfied. And so when you're negotiating, and this holds true in negotiation as well, you do not want to give everything in one fell swoop. You want to be able to dole out the good news. However, there's a flip side to this. You want to make sure that you're giving. So you don't want to give bad news in drips and drabs. You want to give good news in drips and drabs, bad news in one fell swoop. And so one example of that is if you're in negotiation and somebody says something that seems so outrageous to you, or an ask that's so big that you can never take, you can actually do a little reset and say, you know what, there's no way that I would be able to agree to that. So maybe we need to take a few minutes and reset, and let's talk about what we need to do, because that's something that is completely out of the realm of what we can do, rather than trying to negotiate back and forth on that specific concession that's being asked for. Okay, and so think about giving those concessions in progressively smaller amounts. So in that last example, it was $10 and $10. The reality is you'd be a lot happier if it was $10, $5, a $2 bill, and then 3 singles. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. And the only way that you can do that is if you value your concessions. We'll skip through that, because when you give them concessions, it's almost like you're tossing some cash in the toilet. And so you want to make sure you have total clarity on what cash you are throwing away. And so take that time, once you've established what are some of those concessions that you could make or that you will ask for, again, because concessions are on both sides. What would you be willing to give up, and what do you want to ask for? Because there's all different types of ways you can get creative with concessions. Value each one of those different things so you can put them in descending order of priority of what matters to you. So here's an example. If you were doing a media deal, beyond just the rate, for example, and worrying about negotiating about a CPM, you'll want to think about all of these other aspects of the negotiation and other concessions you can ask for. So can you give them a better CPM if you can increase the total deal size, or the term of the deal, or throw in a first right of refusal, or case studies, testimonials, joint PR, cross-selling, access to their executives. There's a whole number of different ways, but then this is just a laundry list. So what you want to do is then order that in priority, so that when you go into that negotiation, you know exactly what you want to go to next in terms of what you'll give up and what you'll ask for from the other side. And then what you'll want to do in that negotiation is you want to make sure that you're labeling your concessions. And what that means is, as you're having that conversation, you want to identify very clearly what you've given up and the benefits to your counterpart. And that benefit piece is important. Again, not just from a positivity gets to a win-win, but research shows, again, that they care more about their personal gain than your sacrifice, right? And if we take off our negotiation hat and we put on our human hat, this is how we all feel all the time, right? Like, you care about what's good and how is it good for you, rather than necessarily what somebody else has to do. And it's just the reality of how most people work. And so as you get into that give and take back and forth with a negotiation, not only do you want to make sure that you are stating out loud, you know, as a reminder, here's what I've done for you. You want to explicitly, but very diplomatically, request reciprocity for what it is that you've done. Because many times people are so focused on their own situation that they might even forget what it is that you've already agreed to or given up to benefit the negotiation. And that is pretty typical. And again, let's put on our normal human hat. For those of us who live with somebody else, let's say your job is the one cleaning the toilets. If the toilet's pretty much always clean, your roommate or your partner or spouse will not know or even remember that you've cleaned the toilet. So every so often you have to be able to say, hey, you know, I just wanted to remind you, I've been cleaning the toilets every week since we've been quarantined here. Do you think it would be possible for you to do the laundry or whatever the other, could you clean the floor, whatever those things are. And so that example of painting the picture for your negotiation counterpart on what that concession could look like is incredibly helpful as well. Because remember, you've made that list of concessions you would ask for and concessions that you would give up and the value of each. So as soon as you give something up, you want to take a look at what are those things you want to ask for. And then the thing that's most valuable for you, you want to even suggest that and throw that into the conversation. So again, if you had a list of laundry and cleaning the floors and doing the dishes and doing homework with the kids, depending upon your situation right now, if you put that in order and doing homework with the kids or homeschooling is the top of the list, then the way you'd frame that conversation up is, hey, John, just as a reminder, I've been cleaning the toilets and all of the bathrooms. Do you think it would be possible for you to return the favor or to do your part so that we're all pitching in by leading the homeschooling? Okay, and so again, if you think about a promotion or a job, here are just some of those examples that you can get creative with your concessions and then put them in order of what you value most. So you're not just thinking about money, but all of those negotiables or concessions that you can bring to the table so that you come out as strong as possible. And finally, we're going to finish up with some log rolling. This is a term that essentially means when you go into a negotiation, this is where you're trading across issues. Okay, so you have to know your priorities and the priorities of the other side. And that's because if one side values something more than the other, again, in that example of if I really don't want to do the homeschooling, but you really don't want to clean toilets, then it becomes easy for both of us to feel like it's a win-win. But if we don't know, if I don't know that you hate cleaning toilets, then it's really hard to start trading and log rolling back and forth across different issues so that we can all feel like it's a win-win. Now, the great piece about log rolling is that all you have to do is be willing to take the other side's perspective, and it will increase your performance in any negotiation. So again, research that's out there. But as soon as you put those glasses on and say, okay, I'm going to view this from their side and take their perspective, not necessarily saying that you care about them having the best outcome or you want them to feel great about this negotiation. You don't even have to go that far. In fact, that can hurt you a little bit because you may give up more concessions than needed. You don't have to go that far. All you have to do is try and understand what their priorities, intentions, and interests are. And that perspective taking will make you come to a stronger negotiation outcome. And log rolling is especially helpful when you get into a situation where there might be an impasse in a negotiation or a partial impasse, which means you feel like you can't necessarily come to agreement. It's the perfect time. If you think of a divorce, you could say, okay, it seems like we can't come to an agreement. Bob, I know that you really love that stereo and your album collection that you've saved up over the course of the last 40 years. I really love the dining room table. What if we agree to you taking everything related to music and I'll take the dining room table? Okay, that's an example of how you can get past that impasse by putting on the perspective of the other person. And so in an industry-specific scenario for all of us in this industry, it might be that a salesperson or a publisher, they care about all of these different things like a longer deal term, a higher deal size, more money up front. They want a testimonial or PR so that they can use this with others. And on the brand side, you may care a lot about things like owning premium inventory, locking out your competition, reductions in unit prices or overall cost saving. And so if you can start to understand with each of these different variables into the equation, what people value the most, it gets very easy to say, okay, well, we couldn't agree on the CPM, but what we can do is we can give you, if instead of making this a 1-year deal, we sign a 3-year deal, we'll give you category exclusivity. And over 3 years, if it's 10 million instead of 2 million for 1 year, will also bring down the rates. So by rolling those different logs, you can get to a better place together. And so with that, We are going to do a short simulation. So we're going to break you up, hopefully, into groups of 3 or possibly 2. And what we want you to do is just one of you take on practicing doing or starting the negotiation, and then role play a little bit, because just like we said right from the start, practice is what makes perfect. And so when you come out of this, we'll have a few more tidbits for all of you. So if you can stay on, we're going to do this real short for just 3 minutes or so, but just see what it feels like for even just 3 minutes of role playing with each other. In the handout, you will find your 12-point win-win negotiation plan that I hope that you will use from here on out anytime you need to have a conversation, either on the personal front or the professional front. So please keep that with you and use that anytime that you need to get in the right mindset and prepare. And while we only got a few short minutes to practice here, I would strongly advise that before you go into any important negotiation that you have coming up, to find a negotiating partner and practice with them back and forth. It certainly could be someone that you met in your breakout room today, but if it's certainly something work-related, you want to make sure that you are using someone who understands the nature of your business. If it's something on the home front, then that's the perfect time to call a friend. If you feel like you're just getting your feet wet when it comes to things like log rolling, and you could use some extra help in terms of making sure that you don't lose your balance and lose out, then if you need some extra help, certainly all of us at the Wet Cement team would love to help you or your organization in terms of building out what is your strategic plan for some of the important negotiations that you have coming up through consulting, training, or even individual coaching with anyone on your team. Certainly would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can send a note directly to us. We also have free bonus material that can help you with all aspects of how we've helped WE.DOOH, but then beyond that, in terms of how you can be your most fearless self, both at work and in life. And so that you'll find on the Wet Cement website. There's a section called exclusive material, and you'd use that same password that you use to get the handout, which is fearless. And with that, I will just say, I can't wait to see all of you flexing your negotiation muscles over the course of the next few weeks and months. And if you do participate in negotiation, you come up with a plan now, please share with us what worked for you, what was helpful, what didn't you get, what was too hard to understand. Where do you need additional support? And we may be able to weave some of that in some of the future WE.DOOH programs that we do at the DPAA.